We're going live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for patiently waiting while we worked out our technical difficulties, but we are live. I'm Ellie Blue, talking to you from Microcosm Publishing's headquarters here in Portland, Oregon. And I'm talking here with Laura O. Foster, the author of some really wonderful books. We first worked with her to publish her book, Walking with Ramona, which is a guide to Beverly Cleary's old stomping grounds here in Portland. It's like a wonderful short walk full of historical context. And then also Portland Stair Walks, which is her newer book. It's a revision of an older book, but like a complete rewrite, completely new book. And it takes you on all sorts of different walks in Portland that take you up and down stairs. And it's very wonderful. Hi, Laura. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good after our momentary stress getting live.
I know, right? That was that made me feel like we were made for the analog world of walking around and looking at trees, and not so much for the computerized world in our homes.
So true.
Well, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and your kind of how you became such how you became a walking guide author and an expert on walking in Portland? What was your journey like?
Sure. Yeah. So I moved to Portland in 1989, and it was a very different city back then.
Wow. No kidding.
Yeah, it was quiet, and it was just coming out of a recession. Housing was super cheap. I was warned not to live on the east side because it was super dangerous. I mean, this was by somebody in the suburbs. So yeah, so I didn't know what to expect, but I instantly fell in love with Portland and started just walking from my Hollywood neighborhood, going, 4 or 5 miles in any given direction, exploring. And I was so enchanted by the city's unusual nature in that we had, of course, a lot of cities had streetcar lines back 100 years ago, and Portland did too. But what we have retained that a lot of cities haven't are the old commercial districts that used to be kind of at the terminus of a streetcar line or along it. And so you could walk like from Hollywood to through Laurelhurst into the Hawthorne district down to Division, and there'd be this intermittent like beautiful neighborhoods and then a commercial district, more beautiful neighborhoods, commercial districts. So you can walk for miles in the city, and there's always so many great things to look at. The city now, of course, is way different. It's been discovered. We're a tourist destination, or we were before coronavirus. So maybe that's good. It'll be fewer tourists. I don't really like tourists in my town, and it makes me feel like, oh, is that what I'm like when I'm a tourist? Sort of annoying,
I know, it's funny. It's like the wonder of exploring a new place is so different when it's like a familiar place than when it's an unfamiliar place.
Yeah, and I'm really I'm very green. Like I drive an electric car. I'm not as green as you, Ellie, because I do not bike everywhere. But I think that there's so much to see and experience in your own area. And Portland is just, you don't need to drive 50 or 100 or 1,000 miles to see amazing stuff. We have so much right here. And we have one of the best park setups in the country. I think we're number 3 on a list of parklands in the whole country. So you can weave into neighborhoods and parks so seamlessly and see, old growth trees on a walk that also has a coffee shop at the other end of it. I mean, it's just so cool.
Where do you find those old growth trees, if you don't mind sharing?
Yes, well, of course, there's I think the oldest Doug fir in town is on the Balch Creek near the Wildwood Trail, or it might be right on the Wildwood Trail. But there is an old growth grove of trees in my neighborhood. I live on McNamee Road, and it's so we're outside the city limits, but just about 15 miles from downtown. So yeah, not far from things.
Wow. Well, what has life under quarantine, has that sort of like kept you more at home, or are you still going on walks, or what's your life like for the last couple of months?
Yeah, I'm not walking in town. I've only done it once, and it was like it reminded me of I went one evening after school with a classmate, and so we went like 4 o'clock to 7. We walked along Alameda, and don't know if you've been to Italy. There's a tradition called passeggiata. I'm maybe not saying it right, but at the end of the day, people flow out of their homes onto the streets and walk and visit with neighbors. And that's what was going on in Portland at passeggiata. And then at 7 o'clock, or was it 8, everybody starts dinging their bells and banging pots to thank the first responders. So it had sort of a little bit of a carnival atmosphere. That was fun. A lot of people, enough that you had to actively avoid them. And that was even walking right down middles of streets. So that was pretty cool. Portlanders have such a great resource. You know, it's not like you're cooped up in an apartment. Even if you are, you've got Portland to explore. So I think we may be better off than some places like maybe Houston, which is not quite so walkable, for example.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I kind of always, as a bicycle activist in my previous life to publishing, I always had this idea that after a great apocalypse, bicycles would take over the street, but it turns out it's dog walkers and drag racers. And
Yes, I have been in a swarm of them on Highway 30. It's frightening. Yeah,
I believe it.
Yeah.
But what do you think about this? So the city has been talking about and maybe slowly implementing creating more low traffic streets. Like we already have our network of neighborhood greenways, which you can tell by the sharrows. And they're talking about sort of like bollarding off more streets to become pedestrian and bicycle only, so that there is more space for people to like kind of get outside and walk and be active while being safe. Have you run into any of that, or have you encountered those at all?
I haven't been in the city since they started setting up and creating more of those, but I think it's an excellent idea. I mean, I'm always surprised when I craft routes. I always stay off of like busy streets, or even a street like Northeast Knott. It's a beautiful street, but it's pretty heavily driven. And so if you go 3 or 4 streets parallel from any busy street, you're going to find streets that nobody drives on except the people that live there. So those are the streets I have crafted and put into my walks. And I see no reason why they need to have any traffic on them other than the people who live there. And so I'm all for, making more streets for walkers and bikers. It would make for a more livable city. And as more of us learn how to use other options like bike share and things like that, it'll just make it more pleasant for everybody, cleaner too, better air to breathe.
The air has definitely been cleaner since all of this started.
Yeah.
Except for the pollen, which is the great irony. So it sounds like when you are crafting your routes for your guides, for your guidebooks, and also for the walks that you lead, you're already sort of looking for what people now want, which is streets without a lot of cars and also routes without a lot of other people on them. How do you find those? Like, what's your process for developing a new route?
Well, part of my process comes from my really deep familiarity with Portland. Like, for example, people have said, "Oh, you should write a book like this for Seattle," but I don't live there and I don't have like this super deep knowledge like I have for Portland. So my very first step in crafting a route is picking places that I know because I've seen them are interesting, maybe because of architecture or infrastructure. But one thing I love to exploit as a resource are what I call the city's kind of selvage edges. If you're a sower, you know what I mean. It's the kind of the edge of a neighborhood where it bleeds into maybe a creek or the river or even a freeway or an industrial area. Those streets are often really great architectural gems, and no one ever drives on them because they're usually dead ends or they don't have great throughway to anywhere else. For example, there's some in the Kearns neighborhood, and I-84 is right there, but there's an old building that was a blacksmith shop that's still there, and it's on this little bucolic street that you can just about imagine what life was like 120 years ago. Even though there's a freeway nearby, it has managed to preserve its charm. So that's one thing. I also I'm a big believer, even though I've been unsuccessful at getting my 4 kids to join me in this, in loving paper maps. So we have paper maps all over the place. My husband has topographic maps. So when I first started, I would look for tight contour lines because that would tell me that, oh, there's a really steep spot. And above that steep spot, there's probably a really cool view. So we wove a lot of those into my routes, and just now I do a lot of looking on Portland maps, Metro's maps online to find newly acquired green spaces that I can incorporate into things. Because Metro buys a lot of land, and a lot of their places, unlike, they have nature parks like Graham Oaks, for example, or Smith and Bybee, everybody knows about. They have tons of land they don't advertise, and those are great places to explore on foot. Yeah.
That sounds like good advice for people who aren't necessarily looking to craft a map, but just looking to take a walk and maybe not encounter too many people or cars. Which, do you have, I guess there are some things that are the same, but there are some things that are very different. But maybe you do have insight into this. Like when you're going on a walk normally and you're on a trail or a sidewalk that happens to be very crowded, is that something that in the normal course of events, not during a pandemic, would you try to get away from that? Or do you have etiquette to share for like, how do we share space with other people in crowded walking conditions, especially when that's not safe?
Well, because of the virus, you mean?
Yeah.
I am a real militant street walker, in the right sense.
Take the lane, Laura.
I don't believe streets are only for cars. And so if the sidewalks are crowded and I'll just walk down the street and the cars will have to watch for me. I'm not going to be ignorant about it and have headphones on and walk with my back to oncoming cars. But I think the more we pedestrians are out there using all the infrastructure that we've got, the more they have to drive carefully. And, I've read about places in Europe where they eliminate all traffic signs, no speed limits, no warnings. Everybody has to be constantly on the alert for everybody, bikers, walkers, wheelchair users. And it works. The traffic goes, less than 20 miles an hour, but it's able to flow, and everybody else gets to ambulate the way they choose. So I'm for that.
I love that. I feel like people should take back the streets, and you are right. There is some research that shows that that people drive more slowly when there are more obstacles and confusing things happening, which we need more of that than ever right now, though I would prefer my body not be that obstacle. I don't know.
Oh man, I've got the glare down. I just look at my I've got age on my side, and nobody wants to hit an older lady.
So I want to get into a little bit like specific routes or places that you recommend people go explore now during the pandemic, when people maybe have time during the day or just need to get out during the day. Let's talk about that now. I know that you kind of came up with some specific recommendations, places where there normally aren't a lot of people.
Yeah, I did in preparation for this. So I started thinking about, well, what are some of the neighborhoods that are less known? Like, for example, Alameda Ridge, that's kind of a walker's mecca. I would probably avoid that. That was actually where I went the other night, and it was crowded. So I'm going to read off some of these street neighborhoods that I think are amazing, and they're not quite as thick with walkers. One of them is Gander Ridge. That is the ridge above PSU going up to Portland Heights. There's some really cool streets like Cardinal in there that's like a serpentine snake winding its way up the hillside. It's got lots of staircases, and it's in Portland, Stair Walks. You don't see very many people walking because it's challenging walking. It's hilly, but the views are spectacular. And then you can also weave parts of that into the PSU campus, which is so quiet right now. And PSU, if you haven't been down there in the last 5 or 10 years, it's turning into this little architectural gem of a campus. Lots of new buildings and sculptures. Really, really nice. I'm a student there now, and so I was getting to go down there every day, and just I really appreciate what a gem that is for our downtown. So Portland State, Gander Ridge. Another one is Linton. It's the funkiest neighborhood in the city, except for maybe Errol Heights, which is also quite lovely and charming. But Linton has all these, it's on the steep slopes of the Tualatin Mountains in Northwest Portland. And it's one end of it is anchored by the St. John's Bridge, or it anchors one end. It has these sub-neighborhoods that are separated by Forest Park. But if you go into one of the sub-neighborhoods, and for example, one of them is called Linton Hill, there's this maze of streets that sometimes it's just single car wide, so quiet. Cats. I think there's a picture in Portland Sidewalks of a cat just lounging in the middle of the street in the middle of the day, you know.
I love that picture.
Yeah, and there's lots of stairs there. And then at the very top, Metro has just acquired an old farm that has magnificent oak trees, and it's not developed yet, but it is public. So Linton is never crowded. Portland Heights, most beautiful neighborhood in the city, I would say, for just gorgeous homes. It has lots of tucked away streets, and this hidden pedestrian bridge. And Vista is the main street that cuts through Portland Heights. I don't walk on Vista. It's noisy with traffic, even though it's beautiful, but lots of streets off of that. And that's also in Portland, Stair Walks. I have walked in Portland Heights in my other books too, but the route I crafted for this particular book, I really love, because it got me on streets that after 25, 30 years, I had never been on before. So I would say the book is a great resource. Of course, I'm plugging the book. There it is. Hold it up.
There's Portland Stair Walks. It's wonderful. You can get it at microcosm.pub if you don't have a copy.
All right, we got that taken care of. Another amazing neighborhood is Hillsdale, and a lot of people don't even know where Hillsdale is in Portland. It's also featured in the book because you could craft 30 different great routes from Hillsdale, which has this beautiful city center, kind of near Wilson High School. And then you go up to the highest peak in town at Council Crest. There's many ways to do it, and they're all interesting with streets that very few cars. The only cars up there are the people that live up there. So those are just a few places. And I've started calling streets that are, or places to walk that are less traveled, the blue sidewalks of Portland.
The blue sidewalks? Why blue?
It's a reference to William Least Heat Moon's book, Blue Highways. And he called them blue highways because on maps, they were blue. They were not the main interstates or freeways. They were the roads less traveled. Yeah.
I love that. Well, those, and if you want to come back to this later, this interview will be stored on YouTube, so you can rewind and catch all of Laura's recommended blue sidewalk routes in Portland. I love that. I kind of want to go out with some blue paint and make that real.
I know.
So I have a feeling those might become very crowded sidewalks if they were actually marked.
Well, I do feel that it's okay because people really like to go where other people are. I'm different. I don't like going where other people are. I like being alone when I walk. And so they tend to, walk the Esplanade or Alameda Ridge, places, or, straight down Hawthorne or something like that. Places that are don't require a lot of, they just keep you with other people. And that's not really what I like to do. And in terms of a pandemic, it's not what anybody should be doing right now.
So if you were to go out and go on a walk and it was crowded and there were a lot of other people, what would you do?
If I were alone, I would leave, or I'd go off into some side streets. But I was with a friend, and we were kind of trying to hit the staircases and stuff. So anyway, I would. But even Alameda Ridge, it had a street called Maltby, for example. I had never ever been on, even though I lived within a mile of it for years. So there are ways to get off the beaten path. If you see people coming at you, take a left and see what happens when you go left.
That's great advice. So when you're walking alone, what do you do? Do you listen to podcasts or music, or do you count things, or what do you do with your mind while you walk?
Never listen to anything other than what's around me. For one thing, I do tend to walk in streets a lot, and so I want to have my ears cueing me into what's coming behind me or in front of me. Also, I want to be able to chat with people. I have the best talks with people in their yards when I'm alone. When I'm with someone else, I generally don't stop and talk, but really nice visits. And I think, the city is, I much prefer walking in the city than in woods, even though woods are beautiful too, but I just find people's creativity that they exhibit in their yards, in their landscaping and their paint jobs, their gardens. It makes me feel good about humans. We're a creative lot here in Portland, and people are so inventive. I just love that.
I
And
think
oh, sorry, one thing, you don't really see that if you stay on the main routes. You have to get off into these little nookie streets where you'll find somebody who turned their whole front yard, for example, into a series of rock cairns. Just really random stuff.
I think you definitely like choose routes for, I don't know, maybe you leave some of your conversational mojo behind, or maybe you choose routes for this. But the very last time that I socialized with a friend in person was I went on part of your Alameda Ridge walk with her and her family, and I walked in the street and they walked on the sidewalk, and it was like right at the very beginning of all this. And we totally stopped and had amazing conversations with people in their yards, just like you said. And that is not something that I normally experience when I'm like walking in my own neighborhood, even with my neighbors. So I definitely thank you for leaving us that route with those with that social magic.
Sure.
We have a question from the audience. Can you tell us about like your guidebook writing process? Like everything from like where you come up with the idea to like how you actually put it together, and yeah, how does it work?
Okay, well, I want to feature, especially since I've written 8 books now, I try to feature areas I haven't focused on, which is hard to do. But like I said, for example, about Hillsdale, you can craft different ways to, explore that neighborhood. So I look for things like heritage trees, interesting architecture, something that's historic, or if I want to talk about, for example, the disastrous effect of urban renewal, that I need a route that's going to show me what the before and after of urban renewal. So for example, South Portland, Lair Hill, there's some intact area that's super charming and historic and architecturally rich. And then there's the area that was demolished, which is interesting now in its own historic way, because that was in the late 50s. That's the South Auditorium District. So when I want to talk about a topic, that leads me. I pick routes that, of course, keep you off main streets. I always investigate dead ends, and if a dead end has a path to another street level, that's always going to go in the route. I'm a big fan of dead ends and staircases, of course. My routes are super circuitous, so they're not the most direct way to get from point A to B, which some people, people get it. It's an exploring route, so they are not. So there's lots of turns. Let's see, what else do heritage trees. Sometimes I want to talk about native plants. So if I see an especially gorgeous stand of, say, Oregon grape, Mahonia, I'll make the route go by that. Parks, natural areas. And then I really love to focus on weaving in the seamless, the seams of the city, like where neighborhoods blend into a park. And so after I've created a draft route that hits all these, like triangulates all my different wish list points, I'll create a route at home looking at maps, and then I'll go out and ground truth it, as they might call it. And I do that on my bike often, because in the car I tend to, well, the car is just a rude thing to do, to drive around and back into a neighborhood or go into a dead end and have to back out. So I use my bike a lot for that, stopping and taking notes. And then I go home and I revise the route and start weaving in the historic research, or if it's ethnobotanical or any facts that I want to weave in to tell the story of that place. I start my draft, and then I usually will walk a route 5 times or so before it gets published, because it's so easy to when I'm giving directions, it's very easy to skip a step. And so I like to write something, let it sit for a good, several weeks, and then go back to it with a cold eye, and then rewalk it and go, oh yeah, I forgot to include this. And yeah, so that's kind of how it goes. It's very iterative. It's not just one idea. I go explore it and I write it. It's recursive is another word.
I like that. It reminds me of the sort of writing and editing process, but like in real life. And then of course it also has the writing and editing process as well. It's obvious that you work very hard on these, and you have an incredible eye for detail. Like when your manuscripts have come in, like you have some of the most meticulously, not just written but formatted. Like you give us directions, you tell us like what street names are spelled weird so that our copy editors don't. And how did you learn to do all of that? Like, did you just like sit down and like figure out how to write your first guidebook, or did you have like experience that led up to this?
I was a book editor for Beyond Words Publishing. They're in Hillsboro. They're still there, and so I edited other people's manuscripts. And then I way back when I was in my 20s, I wrote technical procedures for a bank, and that taught me the value of really being meticulous, because it's very easy to skip. Like I said, it's easy to skip a whole step, and then you know it. It's in your head. You've seen it or you do it. And your reader is just like totally lost. You've lost them. So I believe that as a writer, if you start to make a lot of small mistakes, you lose credibility, and your readers don't trust you. And I want them to trust me as someone who will take them interesting places and not get them lost. Yeah.
How is it different? Do you have a different process for developing a route to like lead people on as a in-person tour guide than you do for developing a route for a book?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because some of the tours that I've done for the city, we get 50 to 80 people. And so for those, it's I simplify it, because fewer turns, and try to find or create a route that has maybe 7 or 8 great places to talk about, and then the rest is people want to chat with each other. So I can't be stopping too often and giving them tidbits about every 4 times a block. So yeah, they're simplified versions of my books routes.
Do you have themed routes that are some of your favorites?
Well, I mean, Portland Stair Walks, the theme is stairs, of course, and dead ends. And then I had Portland City Walks, which is out of print, but it's widely available used. And that book's theme was architecture, because it was flatter neighborhoods. And a lot of the East Side neighborhoods are just architecturally rich, like Irvington, for example. The whole neighborhood is on the National Register of Historic Places. Same with Ladd's Addition. And then Portland Hill Walks, which is also out of print. That one was about hills, so it's not unlike Portland Stair Walks. So those are my themes. Sometimes I want to showcase, like I said, infrastructure or urban history. I don't want to sugarcoat Portland's history or even current topics. I don't want to write, I love Travel Oregon and Travel Portland for what they are, but I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the booster who only talks about how amazing everything is. I think that word should be retired, actually. But
that's an amazing idea.
Touche.
I want to cut in here and welcome the audience to write in with questions in the chat bar. Just to the right of this screen, you can type in a question, and Lydia, our publicist, is waiting in the wings to let us know what they are. But I do have a few other questions for you. First is, are you working on any new routes right now, or are you working on any new writing projects right now?
Well, I'm sort of taking a break. I think I've told you, I'm getting a master's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And so I'm hoping that I'm halfway through almost, hoping to develop some kind of content for English language learners using Portland as the curriculum.
Oh, that's wonderful. What would that look like in practice?
Well, I haven't gotten into curriculum writing yet, so I'm still learning so much theory. But I'm thinking, I think there's a little bit of fear. I know when I did some work with Metro and we worked with Hispanic community in Cornelius and Forest Grove, there was some fear of walking into places that you didn't know to be safe. And so I want to create some kind of guides that assure people this is a great place to explore, and this is how you can become a Portlander, is just exploring the city. I don't have real definite ideas about how to do it yet, though.
Are there any places that you would recommend people go, or would definitely recommend they stay away from if somebody was like new to Portland and maybe concerned about their immigration status or about their safety in public or on streets?
Oh, immigration status. No, the only thing I can think of is no, I don't. I go everywhere. I often have seen a lot of homeless folks, and I've often had some of the best conversations of my day with them and have never experienced fear. but I think I'm a little unusual that way. I'm pretty fatalistic about life, and I feel like, get out there and go with an open heart and mind, and generally good things happen to you.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm thinking about more like, like Ahmaud Arbery, who was shot in Georgia by vigilantes a couple of months ago. And yeah, and I just I feel like I can go out on the streets and feel safe, but I don't know if I would be able to do that if I looked differently than I do. And yeah, do you have any advice for people who are maybe concerned about their safety in that way, like worried about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, remember the Ethiopian young man who was killed in Southeast Portland in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could remember his name.
Mulugeta Sarah.
Mulugeta Sarah, yeah. Yeah, he was just minding his own business in a Southeast Portland street. And that, I can't even imagine a neighborhood where that would happen today, but it happened. So I don't have an answer to that as a white woman. I don't have that issue. I've got the privilege of not having to worry about that.
I feel like when I'm walking around, I try to stop and at least be a witness when I see police interacting with somebody, or when I see someone with a pickup truck with an American flag hanging off the back, I try to at least be there to witness what they're doing. And I don't know. Yeah, there's no easy answer to that one, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't really experienced anything like that in Portland, any overt, threatening of another person. So I can't speak to that too much.
Oh, hopefully things will get a little, hopefully things are calming down a little bit, what with all of this pandemic. I'm not seeing any audience questions, so I'm just gonna finally ask one final question, which is, what are you most excited to do once the quarantine is lifted?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I love riding my bike around Portland and a road trip. Last year I took a 7-week road trip with my husband. And that was one of the best things we've ever done together. Just getting out and exploring the country, Portland, or it's not Portland, but the American West. I want to do that again.
I remember travel. Travel was awesome.
Yeah. I know. I don't think things will ever be the same again. And in some ways, I think that's good. I think air travel will probably never be at the levels it was, where people were so blithely jetting across the country for a single meeting. So
here's hoping. Well, yeah. I'm going to do a short commercial for our next event, which is with Jessie L. Quack, who wrote this book, From Chaos to Creativity, which is about how to be productive as a creative person. This may or may not be relevant to just about everybody right now. And she also has a workbook, the Chaos to Creativity workbook. And we'll be doing a live chat like this one with Jessie on Wednesday, May 20th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So we'll put a link. There's a link in the description of this video to that. And please bookmark it. If you hit the subscribe button below this video, you'll get notified of our upcoming live streams. We're doing a bunch of different live events with our authors. This has been our Microcosm live interview with Laura O. Foster, author of Portland Stair Walks and the wonderful Walking with Ramona. We didn't really talk very much about Ramona. I don't know. Would you recommend that people go on the Ramona walk now, or do you think that's probably too crowded?
Oh, I don't think it's too crowded, and this is actually the best time of year to see that neighborhood. That neighborhood is probably the most colorful in Portland for spring beauty and bloom, so go now.
Yeah, okay, so check out, if you want to go see places where Beverly Cleary grew up and set her books, you can go and talk to or you can get a copy of Walking with Ramona and go walk around the Hollywood neighborhood and see some beautiful flowers. Oh wait, we do have an audience, not so much a question, but Eric Wagner wanted to say that one wonderful experience I had was on a Portland Stair Walk where you talk about Roy Rex Lucy and his totem poles. And then we saw him and he invited, let me see. And he invited my cousin and I in to see them. It was amazing. That is awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad. I had the same experience once. I was leading a hike of maybe a dozen people, and there were 3 or 4 kids on it. And he invited us in and let them do a little chiseling on one of the in progress totem poles. It was magical. Yeah, it was. Yeah, he's
maybe which walk is that?
That is in Portland Stair Walks, and it's the one Portland Heights. I believe it's on page 107. I'm pretty sure that's it. It's off of Arden Terrace, I think it's the name of the street. But anyway, cool guy. Cool.
Well, maybe people walking around Portland Heights will meet Rex and talk to him quietly from a 10-foot distance or more.
Yeah, probably not going to get invited in right now.
Probably not. Well, we have a bunch of other people just saying thank you, and I want to add to that. Thank you so much, Laura. It's really always a pleasure to work with you, and it's such a pleasure to talk to you.
You too, Abby. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate your support.
Any final words you want to say?
Just keep moving. Yeah, and always take the sidewalk less traveled.
Thank you, Laura. On that note, I'll say goodbye and talk to you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.